Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for our pre-camp webinar for our Head First Southeast camp coming up next weekend in St. Petersburg. We're going to cover a few details. Before we dive into the content for the evening, let's look at a quick agenda. So after a few notes about who you're going to hear from on the webinar and who you'll see at camp, we're going to talk a bit about what to expect from a scheduling logistics and then how to approach this from a recruiting standpoint. And then we're going to dedicate as much of the evening as possible to live Q&A to make sure that all of your guys' questions are answered in real time. So first up, our team.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Corey Spera, and along with Max, who I'm hosting the webinar with tonight, I help direct the division of Head First Honor Roll camps here. I myself am an Honor Roll camp attendee in 2009 and 2010. Those two camps played a large role in me ending up at Lafayette College, where I played 4 years of college baseball as a relief pitcher, and I was lucky enough to be the team captain my last 2 years there.
Thank you, Corey. And as Corey mentioned, my name is Max McKenna. I'm our Senior Manager of Marketing and Customer Experience here at Head First. I also played college baseball. I played at Amherst College up in Massachusetts, where I graduated in 2011 after a 4-year career there. Went into teaching and coaching at the high school level, first up in Massachusetts at the Phillips Andover Academy, and then at a small private school outside New York City called the Master School before coming back to Head First, where I had interned during college full-time about just over 5 years ago. In addition to Corey and myself, who you'll meet tonight in the webinar, we're going to have a pretty big team of our quote-unquote red shirts. We call our red shirt staff when we're on site at camp. We're going to meet just one of them now, but you'll have a lot of friendly, smiling faces once you arrive as well. Brendan Sullivan, who you'll be hearing from and seeing on site in St. Petersburg, is the founder and president of the Head First companies. Brendan, outstanding baseball player in his own right, as the DC Gatorade Player of the Year here in the district, and then went on to play at Stanford, was drafted in the 26th round by the Padres, played up to AAA, spring training with the Texas Rangers, and started Head First in those off seasons while he was a professional ball player to give players like himself, those pursuing high academic opportunities for college, the best opportunity that they could achieve to achieve those goals of playing at the next level. One more person that you'll meet on site at camp is our camp advisory partner. We partner with a team called the Diamond College Advisory Team, or DCAT, which is a college advisory program for student athletes looking to play baseball and softball in college, who are looking to maximize not only their athletic outcome at the next level, but also, very importantly, their classroom and academic opportunities and finding the best fit at the college level there as well. We're going to be joined by Justin Kronk, who's the DCAT founder and executive director. Justin also attended Amherst, where he played 2 sports, football and baseball, then went into college coaching on the baseball side for a number of years, recruiting coordinator and assistant coach at Amherst, and then at Boston College, UNC Asheville, head coach Shenandoah, a really long coaching career that he now uses and leverages to help families like yours and student athletes like your ball players unlock and really maximize the opportunities for best fit at their college level. Now we're going to turn it over to a quick overview of what to expect once we are on site at Baseball City in St. Petersburg.
Thank you very much, Max. Let's cover a few basics first, the where and when. So we are lucky enough to be hosting our event at Baseball City, located at 7901 30th Avenue North in St. Pete. That's going to be this coming weekend, September 14th and 15th, Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday the 14th, we're going to have our check-in start at 7 a.m. You are more than welcome to arrive a little bit earlier, but we will not start check-in until 7. We'll run that for about half an hour until 7:30, and camp will begin with our all-camp programming with a meeting at 7:40. I want to take a look at an overhead here of that great facility, Baseball City, that I was just mentioning. A couple things I'd like to draw attention to. First, you're going to see a red star towards the left side of your page. That indicates where we will enter the complex. That is where check-in will take place, at that red star right between those two fields there. And on the left and right side of that red star, you will see a couple of rectangles. Those rectangles indicate parking lots. that you are able to park in. Now, there is an opportunity to park in some different spots as well, namely that long, narrow red rectangle towards the upper left side of your screen. That's 80th Street. On 80th Street, there is plenty of close street parking if those two parking lots that I just pointed out are getting full. So that parking on 80th Street is available. And if needed, or if you'd like to park elsewhere, you'll see that Little League complex and soccer field complex in the bottom right corner of your screen. There's a parking lot there as well. And even further south, you can see the beginnings of a small lake there just south of Baseball City. There's a rec center with a whole other parking lot that has a walking path to Baseball City there. So plenty of parking options at Baseball City for you all on the 14th and 15th. I want to talk a little bit about the schedule that we'll be running at camp over those 2 days. So as I mentioned, we're going to run check-in from 7 to 7:30. And then we'll have that all-camp meeting starting at 7:40. That's going to be players, parents, our redshirt staff, hosted by Brendan, who Max introduced just a little while ago. We're only going to keep the players there for a short time, though. We're going to send them off to stretch, and we're going to keep the parents behind and have a parents-only meeting to go over the schedule in more detail and answer any questions you all might have. Once we get the players stretched out and they're ready to rock and roll, the college coaches will have arrived. And we're going to start with our defensive showcase. So the players are going to be grouped by primary position. And the way we run the defensive showcase is that each player gets to showcase at one defensive position. And this is independent of what you've signed up as. So if you've signed up as a primary pitcher and a secondary catcher, but you would like to showcase as a shortstop, by all means, that is completely fine with us. However, we do limit players to only showcasing at one position. Also during this defensive showcase, there are going to be different stations. So the players are going to be showcasing on a field in front of every single college coach in attendance. That's where the showcase is going to take place. But on the other fields, we're going to be doing activities as well for the other positional groups. We're going to be running the 60-yard dash. We're going to be taking some batting practice in anticipation of the offensive showcase coming a little bit later in the morning. We'll also be taking overhand velocity, so a couple of objective assessments there, namely the 60-yard dash and the overhand velocity testing. We'll also have a spot for the pitchers. The pitchers will be doing their own testing, nothing that is going to tax the arm. This is really meant for pitcher only. It's players who are really only interested in showcasing as a pitcher over the course of the 2 days. They're going to have an opportunity to go through a pretty unique set of tests that sort of test their power and agility, athleticism as a pitcher. We do recommend that if you pitch and play another position and are interested in doing both at the next level, that it is a good idea to not do this skill development for the pitchers during the defensive showcase, but to showcase at that other position, whatever it may be, whether that's infield, outfield, catcher, etc. Once that defensive showcase is over, we're going to roll right into our offensive showcase, where we will hit in those same groups that we defensively showcased in. And again, you're going to hit in front of every college coach in attendance in some of the great facilities that we have over at Baseball City. Also going to be taking an objective assessment here. That's going to be the exit velocity. So each player is going to get to hit in front of every college coach in attendance and then get their exit velocity taken, which will then be given to the college coaches later in the day. And that rounds out our schedule for the morning, on Saturday. For the afternoon schedule on Saturday, afternoon and evening, that's when we're going to get into our simulated games. So while the defensive showcase and offensive showcase are going on, once every player has checked in, we're going to be hard at work putting the players on different teams that are balanced by positions. And once we do that, once we assign those players to teams, we will announce those rosters to you all on site. And each player is going to get the opportunity to play in 1 7-inning game on day 1 and 2 7-inning games on day 2. Those of you who have been to an honor roll camp in the past, it's a little bit different. You're probably used to playing a 9-inning game on day 1 and 2 6-inning games on day 2. Still going to get your 21 innings of baseball. It's just going to be split up into 3 7-inning games instead of a 9-inning game and 2 6-inning games. So these games are designed to facilitate action and maximize opportunities. So we've got some different rules that we use that might be a little bit different than your average high school or travel ball game. We're going to go over those in detail once we see you on site. But just to give you a few examples, we start every batter with a 1-1 count. This encourages strike throwing by the pitchers. It encourages swinging the bat by the hitters. We also always play like there are less than 2 outs all the time during camp. We don't play 3 up, 3 down. We play with 6 batters per inning. So just a few different things that a camp like us and a lot of our schools use during their own inter-squad scrimmages just to maximize opportunity and, again, facilitate that action during camp. That batting order that we use is going to run continuously. So, yes, there's going to be an order, and there's going to be someone who gets to hit first and someone who is inevitably going to be last. But we do not restart that order each and every game. So if the 5th batter in that order was the batter that finished off the first game, in the second game, that game will start with the 6th batter in that order. So there's really no top or bottom of the order. And the defensive rotations, again, those are going to be balanced by positions groups. So when we go in and make those teams, there are not going to be 8 shortstops on one team and 2 shortstops on another. We balance all those again for equal playing time across the positional capacities throughout camp. On day 2, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, again, we're going to continue with those simulated games. So everyone's going to get an opportunity to play in 2 7-inning games on day 2. The arrival time for those games is going to depend on your team assignment. You could play in an early game on day 1 or a late game on day 1, and that will determine when you get there on day 2. If you played an early game, you'll get there early on day 2. If you played a later game on day 1, you'll get there a little bit later on day 2. Again, each team playing in 2 7-inning games on day 2. There's going to be a little bit of additional programming in addition to those games, though. There's going to be a panel question and answer. That's going to be for parents about the recruiting process. That's going to be hosted by members of our staff, as well as Justin Kronk from the Diamond College Advisory Team, who Max introduced just a little bit earlier. There's going to be an opportunity for parents of all teams, regardless of if you're in an early game slot or a late game slot, to listen to that panel. Important note here, there are not going to be any additional meetings after each team's second game. So once you play your second game on day 2, by all means, you are welcome to hang around, interact with us, interact with the college coaches. But if you need to head out, if you need to catch a flight, there is no programming that is keeping you on site once that second game is over. And because of that, we always end camp by 5 p.m. because we know people are coming from all across the country to get to St. Pete and need to get back for work, for school on Monday morning. So again, camp is going to end by no later than 5 p.m. on Sunday afternoon, early evening. A couple more notes from me here, just a couple of operational details that I want to make sure everybody is aware of. And the first is with regards to footwear. So Baseball City is a beautiful natural grass and dirt facility, so metal spikes are absolutely permitted and encouraged on the fields. However, we are going to be taking our batting practice for the offensive showcase in a really nice batting cage complex that Baseball City has on their premises. Metal spikes are not allowed in those cages. So during the offensive showcase, there will be an opportunity to change shoes. But we ask that players have a turf shoe or a sneaker that they are comfortable hitting in for that offensive showcase. And just one more note here, bats and helmets. So Head First will provide helmets in each dugouts for the games. Of course, players should feel free to bring and use their own. Sometimes we know that with travel that can be a challenge. So there will be helmets in each dugout for the games, and then we do ask that the bats meet the current high school regulations. So BB Core metal bats. Wood bats, of course, are allowed as well. Let it be known that most of our college programs do indeed use metal bats. So certainly if you come from an area where you always use a wood bat and that's what you're most comfortable using, please feel free to use it, but know that most of these programs are going to be using metal bats that you are playing in front of.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. And now we're going to dive into how to prepare for camp more from kind of the recruiting and engagement and approach standpoint between now and camp. So you see there on the screen, we separate this kind of recruiting engagement and recruiting approach into 3 different phases, separated before camp, between now and next Saturday morning, at camp, Saturday and Sunday, the 14th and 15th, and then after camp, that Monday, the 16th and on. So before camp, this is a really important time to start to gain traction with the schools that are on your list that sometimes goes undervalued or underutilized by a lot of student athletes and families before they see these coaches face to face, whether it's the first time or the third time or et cetera, that they've gotten exposure to these coaches. Between now and camp, what I would encourage student athletes to do is to take a look at the list of the schools that are coming and start to build out a list of those programs that might represent a fit for them at the next level. What are the schools that are the right size or offer the right sorts of academic area of interest, engineering or liberal arts or whatever, or physics? And then what are the geographies that you might be looking at? Are you looking at a school that's close to home, far away from home, in a city, in the suburbs, et cetera? Start to identify the schools on the list that are attending camp that fit those qualities that you're looking for at the next level, and start to do some email outreach. Hey, coach, send them an email in the next couple of days. Hey, coach, I'm really interested in Harvard. Coach Stark, I'm really excited to meet you face to face. I visited and I love Harvard Square, and I would love to, spend 4 years playing for you on Soldier Field Road. Personalize that touch point and denote why you are interested in that school specifically, because that will really go a long way in saying not just that this is a blanket email out to all of the coaches, which also, I advise you don't do that. Tailor this list to only schools that you are highly interested in, and tailor the email to each individual school that you are reaching out to so they know that you are demonstrating legitimate interest in their program to start to set the groundwork. Now, keep in mind that during this time of year, a lot of these coaches are pretty busy with their fall ball schedule. They've, in the last week or so, a lot of them have seen their players return, and their first-year players have just gotten on campus, and they're acclimating them to the college school year, and they're starting up their fall schedules, and they have a lot of stuff going on. They might not have a chance to respond to each and every email that they get from recruits during this time period, but that doesn't mean that they aren't reading them, that they aren't processing them, and they aren't putting a little check by your name saying, oh, I know that Corey Spear reached out to me. I want to make sure that I touch base with him face to face when I see him down in St. Pete's in a week. So laying that groundwork now can be a really good touch point for when you approach a college coach at camp. The key for the Saturday and Sunday of camp is right there. Engage, engage, engage. It's a really unique opportunity to be at this camp during this time of year specifically and have the opportunity to have these face-to-face conversations with these college coaches at the schools you are targeting. It's a really unique opportunity because oftentimes you are separated by the chain link from these coaches, right? They're watching you play, they're getting some sense of how you play in a game, but the different context of exposure. They get your objective measurements and how hard you hit and throw the ball. They're getting your pitching evaluation. They're getting to meet you and get a sense of you as a human being. They're getting to see you play in games. They're getting to see you do your isolated showcase reps. They get such a complete sense of who you are as a player because of these different contexts of exposure. And then in addition to that, they have the chance to have a discussion with you to start to suss out, is Corey Spear the right type of kid for my program? Is he a culture fit for what I'm building in my program for my locker room? And so giving coaches the opportunity to do that by engaging with them while you're at camp is a really, really crucial part of this experience and can set you up for after camp as well. Now, I was a shy high school kid. I know that there are shy high school kids out there who will say, going up and talking to Coach Stark from Harvard, Harvard's my dream school. He's the gatekeeper to it. That sounds like my personal nightmare. I am incredibly nervous about doing this. And we totally get that. And this is where the second bullet point comes in. The structure of camp is built to facilitate this type of interaction very organically with college coaches. having a conversation with Coach Agnew Whelan from Oglethorpe doesn't mean that you have to chase him down and stalk him and wait outside the fence and say, hey, coach, I really want to go to Oglethorpe. I'm a big fan of the Peach Rolls and I really want to play for you. A lot of these conversations can come up very organically. Coaches are on the field with you. They're in the dugouts coaching you during your games. You're rotating through a different group of college coaches during each of your games. You're seeing them around the complex between games. Using all of these different contexts and opportunities to have these conversations is really, really important. But there's a lot of opportunity for them to come about very organically and naturally as well. And if you ever have any questions about how to approach a coach or what to say or what your script should sound like or where a specific coach is, our red shirt team, Corey, myself, our whole team of guys in red shirts is there to always help facilitate those conversations, find a coach, etc. So always feel free to use us as a resource there as well. Then I think that this next phase also cannot be overstated. The post-camp follow-up is a really important piece of this recruiting puzzle for you. I think that sometimes there's a tendency to look at a showcase like this as this discrete 2-day experience. You show up, you have some great conversations with coaches, you talk to them, you play in front of them, and then you say, okay, now I sit back and see what happens. And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to have. The only way to make sure that you have follow-up communication with the college coaches that you want to have contact with is to initiate it. Again, it can be intimidating, but reaching out proactively to these coaches after camp is a really, really key piece to use this 2 days, not just as this really cool, unique 2-day opportunity in your recruiting, but how does this provide a platform and a launch pad for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 steps in your recruiting between now and when you commit to your dream school. So a big part of that is that follow up after camp with the coaches that you spoke to, the coaches that you emailed beforehand that you knew you were interested in, and also the coaches at schools that you had never heard of before you showed up on site, but you had a great interaction with them in the first base dugout during one of your games, or they took 10 minutes to show you the way that they coach a 2-strike approach in their program. Follow up with those coaches, thank them for their time, and start to build towards these next steps, because that is ultimately what can provide the bridge from September 14th and 15th to the commitment to the school that you're looking to go to at the next level. And speaking of some of these schools, you see some of the schools that will be joining us here on the screen. And we're really proud of this list of coaches that'll be attending camp. What you notice here is we partner with a huge variety of different schools across the country and across the academic and athletic spectrum to really offer a wide variety of different experiences that you as a student athlete have access to at the next level. The one thing tying them all together, all great academic institutions. But you'll know Amherst and NYU, both great schools, both wear a lot of purple, very different on-campus experiences, very different baseball experiences. Trinity and Amherst also within the NESCAC still, but have a very different feel. So starting to explore what are the qualities that you're looking for at the next level in your college experience and starting to suss out what schools fit that, but then also keeping an open mind for a huge variety of different athletic and academic experiences at the next level with the coaches that you'll meet next Saturday.
Max, thank you. I want to take a couple minutes just to unpack some NCAA legislation that came down in the spring of 2018, and there's sort of a piece of that legislation that affects the on-site experience of our events. That piece of legislation essentially states that if you have not completed September 1st of your junior year of high school, you may not have a recruiting specific conversation with a Division I coach. So there's a lot there. And again, we'd love to take just a couple of minutes to unpack that and see how it affects the on-site experience of the different types of ball players that we have on campus. So first, would love to talk to our members of the class of 2020 and 2021. So those are our current high school juniors and seniors. And the fall camps for us are always very exciting because it means there's a whole nother group of athletes who are able to have these recruiting specific conversations, because our current juniors have not too long ago, and by the time that we run camp 2 weeks before then, will have just completed September 1st of their junior year. This means you're able to have an in-person recruiting specific conversation with a college coach. So this basically means that there are sort of no limits into what you can talk about with a coach. I can go up to the Lafayette College coach and say, hey, Coach Lyons Harrison, this is why I'm a great fit for your program. Coach Lyons Harrison can, in return, sort of say, hey, this is why we think that we're the best fit for you, and you should come here, versus sort of those other opportunities that you have. So those very sort of persuasive conversations, those recruiting specific conversations, you are able to have that if you're a current junior or current senior, again, a member of the class of 2020 or 2021. And to make it clear for coaches and to help to note that when you check in members of the class of 2020 and 2021, we're going to give you a black wristband during check-in. We ask that you slip that on and wear that during camp. If you don't like to play with a wristband, totally understand, especially pitchers. If you don't want to wear that while you're pitching, keep it in your bag, keep it in your back pocket. But when you go to interact with coaches after the game, in the dugout, between games, we ask that you slip that on just to make it very clear to coaches that they're able to have that recruiting-specific conversation with you. So for our members of the class of 2022 and younger, so those are our current sophomores and younger, this means, of course, that we can't talk to the college coaches in attendance, right? No, incorrect. Very wrong. Very wrong. This is still an awesome opportunity for you to interact with these coaches who are there. However, you just can't have those recruiting-specific conversations. So what can you talk about? Well, you can certainly introduce yourself, get to know these guys, start to build these relationships with them. So introduce yourself, exchange pleasantries, understand sort of where they're from, what their background is, and the same of you. As Max alluded to, coaches are going to be all over the field and in the dugouts while these games are going on. So use them for on-field instruction. If you're out there playing shortstop and you make a really nice play, or maybe you make an error on a ball on your backhand, that coach who's standing out there behind you, ask for their feedback on that play and sort of what you did, what you could have done better. And then of course, and maybe most importantly, make sure you're using these coaches as a resource to develop your game and improve your game. They're going to be watching you for 2 days straight, 3 games, 2 different types of showcases. Ask them, those coaches who saw you play quite a bit, maybe who were in your dugout for a game, see what they think are elements of your game that you could improve on and how you could improve on those elements. So for the members of the class of 2022 and younger, there are still plenty of conversation topics to be had with those Division I coaches. And I have, or at least have been trying to say Division I coaches when I explain this rule, because it only applies to our friends in the Division I space. Therefore, if you're a sophomore or younger and you want to have a recruiting specific conversation with a Division II or Division III school that's in attendance, by all means, you are allowed to do so. A couple more points I'd like to make. We do partner with a company called On Peak. On Peak does our hotel agreements for us. So basically within the areas where we host camps. So in St. Pete this coming weekend, they've gone ahead and have negotiated the best rates in town with a select group of hotels for us. Those rates and hotels can be found on our website if you go to the Enrolled Athletes tab and scroll down to Travel and Accommodations for Baseball. One more note and another partner that I'd like to mention is Next Pro. Next Pro is our at-camp video provider. So Next Pro has a pretty cool product. They tag and record every single pitch of every single game at camp. And by tag, I mean that they tag it to the individual pitchers and batters who were part of that play. So Next Pro has a couple of elements here. First, for us, what they do is that they take those video clips, again, tag them, cut them up by each player, each pitcher and batter involved in each play. They then put all of those videos in a searchable database. So as a coach, I get access to that database and I can go in and search for number 54, Max McKenna. And when I click on Max, Max is both a pitcher and a hitter. So all of Max's pitching videos and hitting videos from those 2 days of camp will pop up for me, the coach, to see and review and to show the other coaches on my staff. So a really, really nice recruiting tool for the coaches, and it can be a great recruiting tool for you as well. NextPro makes those videos available to you for purchase. They also offer a couple of add-ons as well. They include entire game footage where you're able to pull some defensive clips if you made some web gems out in the field. And they also offer to record your defensive showcase so that you can have that in your own video downloadable package. They make all those plays into a highlight reel for you. So if you had 2 doubles, but you struck out in the first game, don't worry, they can cut out that strikeout and they can put a highlight reel together with those great plays that you made as a pitcher, as a hitter, and in the field as well. That's available via NextPro's website if you'd like to purchase that before or after camp. If NextPro hasn't sent you an email yet, they will soon, and they'll shoot you a note after camp as well.
And now, as promised, I want to dive into the Q&A portion of the evening. What you should all see is in the GoToWebinar toolbar, where you found that hand icon earlier, there's a little questions tab. I know a bunch of you have found it already. If you type your question right in there, press send. We'll be responding to them. There's a handful that have come in, and I have some to phrase out to either Corey or myself. If we don't answer it live on the air, quote unquote air right now, we will either follow up via chat and answer it right now, or we'll follow up in the next couple of days, certainly before camp, if you have any follow-ups or anything else. So feel free to send those questions in. If you don't have a chance to get your question answered, or you don't think of it until later, this is absolutely not your only or last chance to get your questions answered. You see there on the screen, take a look at our email address and our phone number. We also have a live chat function on our website. So if you have any questions, feel free to grab us there, and we'll make sure that you're all squared away before we hit the ground in St. Pete's on Saturday. First question that came in, Corey, you know what it's going to be.
Yes.
It's one of our favorites. This is some busy days of physical activity.
Absolutely.
How are these players going to fuel up and hydrate? Is there stuff available food-wise on site? Can they bring coolers? What's that situation like for them?
That is a really, really good question, Max, and I know would be my first question as a player attending camp. First of all, hydration. Let's cover that very quickly. There will be water available to players throughout the day in every dugout and every field on site. We are going to keep the players hydrated. It is going to be warm. It's going to be beautiful weather, but it's going to be warm. So we want to make sure players are hydrated. Now, we will only be providing water. So if there are other types of drinks that players like to consume throughout the day, we encourage them to bring them on their own. Now, we will not be providing food for the players or the parents for that matter. So a couple of different options that you have, players and parents. There is a snack bar on site at Baseball City. Tremendous option, able to sort of withstand the crowds that we're going to have and going to bring to Baseball City this coming weekend. Certainly encourage you to head towards that snack bar to get any drinks or food that you may need throughout those 2 days. There are also going to be plenty of options nearby. Of course, we know that everyone has their apps and that you're able to find what's nearby. We're also going to provide that information for you in the program that we'll give you at check-in. We've highlighted a couple places that are very, very close, that are within just a couple minutes of a drive. To get there and back and get some food, get some drink for your player if you'd like to go off-site. So great option on-site, but certainly plenty of options close by off-site as well. One more note that I'd like to make on this point. Again, bringing your own food, bringing your own drinks is absolutely permissible. This is not a tournament where there is a gate fee and rules against bringing coolers or your sort of off-site food into the event. However, Baseball City has asked us to make sure that we pass along one rule that they will have during this event. The quarters, once you get into Baseball City, the fields themselves are all pretty close together. So the areas between fields are again sort of limited in space. This is tremendous for our purposes and for coaches who are able to bounce from field to field and recruit very effectively and efficiently. But it does limit some space So Baseball City asks that when it comes to things like rolling coolers, large rolling coolers, or large tents that you would like to put up to sit under, they ask that you please do not bring those on premises. If someone sees you with one, they might kindly come up to you and ask to return that to your car. But those are only those very large and bulky items that take up a lot of space in those throughways between fields. So again, so things like large rolling coolers and large tents, canopies to sit under. We ask that you please keep those at your homes or in your cars. But again, bringing in food, drink is not an issue.
Thank you, Corey. And the next question is one that kind of straight to the logistics for pitchers. They kind of have that day one. Then really a big part of their camp experience exposure-wise is going to be those 20 innings of games. And so how does the pitching work? The question is, what's the breakdown for pitchers? How does that game format play with them? Do they pitch in all 3 games? The short answer to that is they do not throw in all 3 games. They do throw in most cases. They will throw in, for primary pitchers in all cases, they will throw in 2 of those 3 games. They'll throw in 1 game on each day. So on day 1, every team will play in 1 game. Every primary pitcher will throw during that 1 game. On day 2, they will throw in 1 of those 2 games. The reason that we do this is purely for arm health. I would love it if we could have every pitcher throw in every game, but it turns out that is one of the non-negotiables in terms of arm care. Corey and I were both pitchers who have dealt with some arm stuff in the past. We're very sensitive to it. And so that's why we don't have pitchers throw in both games on day 2. But that being said, primary pitchers should expect to throw 3 innings over the course of those 2 days, sometimes more, just depending on the breakdown. And secondary pitchers should expect to throw 2 innings over the course of those 2 days. Again, how that breaks down might depend on the team breakdown, but the idea is that a lot of pitchers, many pitches possible, will throw on both days, but they'll throw in 2 of the 3 games so that they're not getting hot twice in a day and cooling down. Corey, next question that I want to throw out to you is, you mentioned kind of talking to coaches in the field, getting this feedback, asking for some coaching points. How do I stand out to a coach as a student athlete? What are the on-field skills they're looking for? What are the intangibles that they register as they're recruiting one of our camps?
Yeah, an important word that you mentioned there, Max, intangibles. Listen, of course, coaches are going to notice the 5 tools, and if you are exceptional at any of those 5 tools, it is absolutely going to catch their eye. Tremendous power, exceptional speed, etc. There are other ways to get coaches' attention aside from those classic, toolsy, tangible abilities on the field, and that's what I'd sort of like to focus this answer on. One of the things that we see all too often in these environments, we try to make everybody as comfortable as we can. However, players are often still very tense. And that's because it's a foreign environment to them. They're not used to playing in front of, 50 coaches on one field. That is, it's new. It's different. During the defensive showcase, they've never seen something like that before. And during the games, they're not used to having coaches in their dugout or behind the screen, behind home plate. So what we find is that the players who are really able to stand out are the ones who are able to overcome this. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but who are able to be themselves and who are able to act like they act in a normal high school baseball game, and who are able to act like they act in a travel ball game. And that's players with a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, chatting it up with their teammates, even if they haven't played with those guys or girls since Little League. Still treating them like they're any other teammate and are cheering for them in the dugout, cheering for them, getting behind them while they're on the field. If a guy makes an error, you pick him up. Things like that to go along with tremendous hustle, always trying to take the extra base, not afraid to get your nice, clean, white head first shirt that will give you in the morning of day 1 a little bit dirty. Those are things that we've been doing since we've been in T-ball. But for some reason, and I think an understandable reason, when you get out there and you're playing in front of, 5 of maybe your dream schools, things change a little bit and it starts to feel a little bit different. And those players who are able to get past that and treat it like any other baseball game, which admittedly is hard to do, and are able to show that great enthusiasm, energy, hustle on the field, it really does go a long way in standing out to the coaches, Max.
Absolutely. And just to really double down on that, we talk to coaches a lot and ask them and ask them to talk to players about what they notice. And they always, yes, they're going to notice if you hit a home run. And that's a great, of course, everyone wants to barrel up 5 balls to the gap and put 3 balls over the fence. But beyond that, what they are paying a lot of attention to is these intangibles. How are you as a teammate? Are you giving energy to those around you? They are very focused on that because it turns out that they have to spend a lot of time over the course of the 4-year college career with the kids that they recruit. And they want to make sure that the kids that they recruit and bring into their program are the right cultural fit and they're building the right program. And the kids in it are going to represent that coach and that program on campus, on road trips, down in Florida, et cetera. They want the right kids in those programs for so many different reasons. Corey, could you speak a little bit about, we mentioned kind of you have the chance to play primary and secondary positions during the games. How does that playing time break down for these players, and kind of how do we balance these teams to ensure that maximal playing time?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we, make sure that we're spreading time equally across those positional groups, and that really starts with our enrollments. So we set strict positional capacities on our enrollments such that we're not going to have 100 catchers who are registered for camp. We put capacities on those numbers, as maybe some of you had experienced when trying to register for a certain position, such that we can make these teams even and fair when it comes to playing time. So again, rest assured, those teams are going to be split up, again, by position group in a very even way that starts with our enrollment process. When it comes to the playing time breakdown of your primary position and your secondary position, not surprisingly, you are going to get more innings at your primary position than your secondary position. So let's just use sort of a classic infield example. You are a primary middle infielder and you're a secondary third baseman. So during one of those 7-inning games, you're going to get the opportunity to play 3 or 4 innings at your primary position. Now, for a middle infielder, that could be shortstop, that could be second base. You're playing both of those for 3 to 4 innings during that 7-inning game. Your secondary position is third base. You're getting an opportunity to play 1 to 2 innings at your secondary position. So you add those up, you are playing, first of all, you're playing the majority of the game in the field. Of course, you are in the batting order no matter if you're in the field or not, as we explained earlier, due to that continuous batting order. But you are in the field for the majority of the game, and you are playing more innings at your primary position than your secondary position.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. And now one question that came up about recruiting timeline and kind of what are coaches looking for at this time of year that I want to spend some time on, because it is such a unique time of year, given both of the recent and the fairly recent and the more recent changes to the NCAA recruiting calendar. So the question came in, at this time of year, what grad years, what age players, what year are coaches looking at and recruiting? Are they looking at seniors? Are they looking at juniors? Are they looking younger? And there's no kind of clean cut answer to this. I really wish that there was a date every year where I said, as of this date, all coaches are looking at 2021s, and then at this time next year, they'll start looking at 2022s and stop looking at 21s. But that's not the reality of the recruiting cycle for these coaches, because they're trying to find a fit on so many different dimensions in the kids that they are recruiting. And so it's a little bit messier than that. The short answer is that during this time of year, coaches will be looking at 2020s, 2021s, 2022s, 2023s, and everywhere up and down the spectrum. Now, they'll be looking at them and recruiting them with different sets of eyes and different lenses on them. For 2020s, some schools that come to our camp, yes, they will have their 2020 class rounded out, but because of the high academic nature of these schools, a lot of them are still actively recruiting 2020s or are trying to recruit the last couple folks for their 2020 class. This is because they need to make sure that so many things shake out in the classroom and with the standardized test scores before they walk a file over to admissions that it tends to be a little bit later for these sorts of high academic schools, even across the Ivy and the Patriot League, which obviously play a very high level of baseball as well. That being said, this camp is a very unique time frame in the calendar because, as Corey spoke to earlier, as of September 1st, 2021s now came eligible for these quote unquote recruiting specific conversations with Division I coaches, whereas up to now they couldn't officially commit with these recruiting specific conversations. And that combined with the fact that the new NCAA recruiting calendar for Division I programs, they have not been able to get off campus and recruit off campus events until Saturday, until September 14th. So our camp is the first opportunity that these Division I schools have to get off campus and actively recruit during this 2021 window. So I imagine that a lot of these Division I's will be looking very heavily at the 2021 class with an eye towards getting them in the door, getting a sense of who they are as a player, getting a second look at them at their camp that's coming up in the fall or winter, getting a sense of their academics and starting to talk to their admissions early in the new year about their 2021 class. That being said, there is still opportunities in the 2020 class at the vast majority of these schools as well. So they'll be looking at both those classes with an eye towards, let's talk Turkey, let's start to get some of these kids committed and really have these very in-depth, as Corey pointed to, persuasive recruiting conversations with them. Now, this does not mean that they are not looking at 2022s and younger. They are also looking at them. It just means that they are a little bit kind of handicapped and handcuffed in what they're allowed to talk about with them. So what they are looking at a camp like ours, they have the chance to engage with them face-to-face because of the structure of our camp, which they don't at a travel ball tournament or at a lot of other types of exposure opportunities where they can't talk directly to the players. At our camp, they'll have the chance to have these discussions, and they are starting to build out their boards for 2022s, 23s, these younger underclassmen. They're starting to get a sense of who are the kids that I can see now that I want to follow up and see again at my camp in the winter, or I want to see at a tournament or at another Head First event next summer, and start to build out what my recruiting universe looks like for the 2022 class and younger. So they are recruiting all these different years. The types of conversations and the lens through which they're looking at is just a little bit different depending on the grad year. Corey, we mentioned kind of some of the game schedule. They're playing every other game. They have some downtime between games. What would you recommend? A player comes up to you and says, "Hey, coach, I just played the last game. I'm not hungry. I'm not thirsty. I'm well hydrated. I don't need any shade. What should I do? What do you recommend players do between their games while they're at our camp, while they have that opportunity?"
Absolutely. Camp in general is such a unique opportunity because not very often do you have 50 high academic schools that so many of our players are interested in one place. And when you are not playing, it presents an awesome opportunity to interact with a lot of these schools. So one of the things that we're going to provide access to on site, and it's going to be available via our mobile website, which you will hear a lot about once you get to camp on Saturday, is a schedule, much like you have a schedule as a ball player of what field you're going to be on and when you're going to play, etc. Coaches have that as well. We essentially split the coaches up into coach groups. They'll be assigned to different fields for different games. So again, much like the players will have games where they'll be playing on a field and then have an off time slot, the coaches will have the same thing. They'll be assigned to a field for a game, and then they'll have off for a game. What that presents is an opportunity for the coaches to bounce around from each field to see every single player in attendance if they'd like to over the course of the 2 days, and really be able to to hone in on some of those players that they, made notes on in an earlier game or during the defensive showcase, offensive showcase, maybe earlier on in the summer. All that is to say that there are going to be coaches who are not going to be coaching on the field during any game slot. So if you are not playing during that game slot, you are going to know what coaches are assigned to fields and what coaches are roaming, are observing during that time period. You are able to go and have conversations with those coaches. Now, a lot of those coaches will choose to go onto a field and watch the game from behind the screen that we put at home plate, or watch the game from a dugout, and that's fine. We ask you to not sort of go in and intrude on that game. But a lot of the coaches are going to be wandering around. They're going to be outside of the fields. They're going to be bouncing from field to field. And when those coaches make themselves available and are off the field, it is a tremendous time, and we encourage you to grab the coaches at that point and have conversations with them. So really, should you use your off time in between your games as an opportunity to get some rest, get some shade, some food, some drink? Absolutely. But I also recommend carving out, part of that off time to map out based on what coaches are assigned and what coaches are unassigned, some conversations that you would like to have. It's a really, really good opportunity for that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And taking advantage of all these different opportunities in different contexts, I think is a really key point, and honestly a hallmark of the connections that we see being made at camp. One question that came in, it's a really good one. What's the best approach on the field that I should take while I'm there? What are coaches looking for? And again, I stick myself to the questions that don't have a clean answer. Coaches are looking for complete players, and yes, they're looking for the tools. But what I always tell players is you have to stick with the game and the approach that put you there. Trust the process, the practice, the hours of diligent hard work that you've put in the batting cage, in the bullpen, on the field, in practice, in the weight room, doing wind sprints. Trust all this work and the approach that put you in this position to begin with, and don't try to do something different all of a sudden when there are 45, 50 sets of eyes on you. If you're a contact hitter who hits line drives up the middle, don't show up to camp and expect to go 4 for 5 with 4 home runs, because it's probably not going to go your way, and that's a recipe to set yourself up for failure. I think the best way to set yourself up for success is trust your process, trust your game and the work that you've put in already, and play your game and play within yourself. Each coach is looking for something a little bit different, so it's not that one sort of thing is going to get you noticed by all 45 coaches that are there either. So trusting your game will help you find the right fit and will set you up for success as well.
And I'll add one thing to that, Max. It was incredibly well said. We alluded to this earlier, and we'll mention it several times when you get on site, but coaches are there to see some action. Again, we do 1-and-1 counts on purpose. It's so that you get up there as a hitter to swing at a strike, and you get up there as a pitcher to throw strikes. So when you're in either of those scenarios as a pitcher or a hitter, you need to have a mindset of aggression, of being ready to hit that first strike that is thrown to you, being ready to not, as a pitcher, tiptoe around the strike zone, but really go after the hitter. So also an important note there, I think.
Absolutely. One more question that I want to touch on is so the question was kind of like, what are the measurements taken for pitchers during their bullpen set, their recorded bullpen session? And there is no recorded bullpen session, but during every inning of every game, there's a coach that is assigned behind the backstop on each field doing what we call pitching evaluations. This includes what they are doing is they're taking velocity on the pitches. They are entering in an iPad all these different notes and fields and pieces of an evaluation and velocities and different metrics that then go out to all the coaches. This includes things like absolute velocity, also command, control, movement, what's their breaking speed like, what's their time to the plate, how do they hold runners, what's their presence on the mound, what's their potential for upside from a physical standpoint. Coaches are taking notes on all these things. And then what we do is, because some coaches are assigned to specific fields and a kid might be pitching on a different field, we take all of these notes and we compile them. At the end of day one, we send them out to all the coaches in attendance. So they all have access to all of these notes that are taken by a specific coach on every pitcher. And they have that before really they leave the parking lot on day one, so that they can look at that and start to set their agenda for who they want to see the next day. We then do the same thing on day two. So every inning of pitcher's performance is tracked by a coach behind the dugout or behind the backstop. And then all of that information, all those notes and measurements and velocities are sent out to all the coaches in attendance, so that they can get a good picture of how these kids threw off the mound if they didn't have a chance to see them live. The other piece about this as well is they have the chance to go back, and if they missed a kid because they got confused about what field they were on the clover or something like that, they always have the chance to go to the pitching evaluations that they receive, and then also follow up by looking at that video, which is tagged to the individual players as well. Corey, one question about kind of timing, and we talked a bit about team assignments. Yeah. What time will kids know what team they're on, and why don't they know before camp?
Yes. So again, it's sort of been a motif, if not a theme, Max, of this webinar, that we have those very strict positional capacities that we limit our enrollments by. We take great care when creating these teams for equal playing time across positional groups. Again, I can't stress that enough. So we don't make the teams beforehand because we need to see who is there. Not every player that signs up for camp will be in attendance for camp. So we will make drafts of the teams that, based on if we had 100% attendance, okay, this is how we maximize every player in attendance and their playing time across their positional groups over those 2 days. However, when players don't show up, even if it's only 2 players, if that happens to be the 2 catchers who are on team number 3, we need to shift some things around. So that's why we don't come out with those teams until a little bit later in the day on day one. If you remember when I was going through the schedule, we start day one in the morning with a defensive showcase and then an offensive showcase. Once that offensive showcase is done, we will have an all-camp meeting to go over some of the game rules, do the coach introductions before we start the games. It is before that meeting that we will have those teams posted to our mobile website. So every player will know what team they are on and when they are playing their first game, when they are done with the showcase morning. When that offensive showcase is over, every player will be able to go onto that mobile site, see what team they're on, attend that game rules meeting where we also introduce all of the college coaches in attendance. And at that point, we'll break into that first set of games. So that's when players can expect to know that sort of very late morning, early afternoon of Saturday.
Absolutely. And there are other camps out there that do their teams before camp and they release them before camp and it's nice and clean. I can't imagine doing our camp any other way that we do, because the opportunity and the idea of maximizing the on-field opportunities for the players at our camp is absolutely crucial. And we need to have the level of attention to detail. We believe it is necessary to deliver the expected experience at camp. And so it's something that, yes, it's a little bit later in the day and it's a little bit more difficult for us, quite frankly, but it's something that we really believe in so that we are able to truly maximize the on-field opportunities during that gameplay. One final question that we're going to get to, because I know that we are up against our allotted hour and I want to make sure we're respecting everybody's time. I mentioned reaching out to schools and coaches that you're interested in before camp. How many should I reach out to between now and Saturday? And this isn't one where I put a firm number and say you should reach out to 5 or you should reach out to 10. I think you should only reach out to schools that you are genuinely and legitimately interested in which, guess what, is not going to be all 45 schools that are on that list. They are too different. Even when I have conversations with kids who say, I'm interested in the Ivy League, I say, great. Why? What does Columbia have in common with Yale other than this imaginary league that they decided they're both in? Think about the qualities of the schools and think about which would be the right fit and let that guide the volume that you're reaching out to. Also, this is where it is really important to personalize these notes as well, because these coaches are colleagues. They work well with each other. They talk to each other. And so if Corey Spira sends an email to Josh Kiefer from Amherst that says, Dear Coach Stark, I really want to come play at Harvard, guess what? Coach Kiefer is going to go talk to Coach Stark and say, hey, I guess Corey Spira really is not that interested in Amherst. So it's where it comes down to assessing your level of interest, and personalizing that is really, really important. I won't put a fixed number on it, but just keeping in mind that it should be genuine interest, and it shouldn't be just a scattershot approach of sending it out to everybody at camp that you can find an email for.
And Max, to do this correctly, this takes a little bit of research, right, on the player's part. I mean, there are, I can sort of speak from experience, there are schools that you might not know about before coming to camp that actually could fit the mold of the school that you're looking for. So this isn't necessarily going through the list of schools that's on our website and saying, oh, okay, I've heard of Harvard before, I've heard of Yale before, I've heard of Holy Cross before. This is going through and doing your research and saying, oh, okay, I don't know too much about Trinity in Connecticut. Let me look it up and see if it's potentially going to be a fit for me.
Absolutely. And with that, again, I want to make sure we're respecting everybody's time. You see there, not the only or last chance you have to get your questions answered. I'll be sticking around to answer a few more questions on the chat that are still coming in, but always feel free to reach out to us, or we will reach out to you in the next couple of days if you ask something that wasn't answered. So please feel free to stick around and get those answered, or if you have to bounce off, feel free to go ahead. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar either tomorrow or Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us this evening and taking some time out of your, I'm sure, busy Monday nights to learn a bit more about what to expect. On behalf of Corey and Brendan and everybody else from Head First that you'll meet in just 5 days or so, we're really looking forward to meeting you face to face. Thank you so much for taking the time this evening.